Chamonix, France is one of the top outdoor destinations in Europe. Its location offers visitors the opportunity to explore the most dramatic portion of the French Alps, including Mont Blanc, the highest point in the entire Alps range. We originally planned 2 days here on our most recent European road trip, but due to severe weather conditions, all we were left with was 24 hours to see as much of the area as possible. So join me as I take you along for some of the most outstanding experiences offered in Chamonix, starting with Aiguille du Midi, possibly the most iconic and popular attraction in town. The gondola ride is significant for many reasons. For example, when it made its debut in 1955, it held the title of the world's highest cable car for nearly 2 decades. Still to this day, it holds the record for the highest vertical ascent cable car, which it achieves on 2 different occasions. Now, before we talk about the experience of riding in this gondola, here's a few tips that might help you prepare for a visit. First, the only possible way to guarantee yourself a spot on a specific day is by reserving online. We made the mistake of doing this way in advance, not thinking about weather and visibility. Since this experience does revolve entirely around mountain views, you'll want to make sure you're going on as clear of a day as possible, and things were looking pretty nasty on the day we intended to go. Unfortunately, they don't allow date changes, which is something I strongly disagree with, so instead we had to hope that the weather was so bad that they were forced into closing and rescheduling us. As luck would have it, this is precisely what ended up happening, but we weren't out of the woods yet. The forecast was only showing clear skies for maybe half of the day, and that time frame didn't match our time frame for entry. So after calling ahead, I found out that as long as you visit on your assigned date, they're actually pretty flexible with the time you visited, and that's something I was a fan of. So things worked out basically perfect for us. I just think of all the other people who come all the way out here and maybe aren't so lucky. Especially because a round-trip ticket to Aiguille du Midi costs a whopping €78 per person. Yeah, we literally just had to wait like 15 minutes once we got there so they could accommodate for us to head up to the peak early. The cable car is surprisingly fast and provides exceptional views in every direction as you watch the landscape change going from the mountain's foothills to subalpine territory. Then you'll actually get out and switch gondolas, which takes you to the base of Aiguille du Midi.
Already the views are quite something, and you can actually see the point that we're going to right now way up there. Guys, this is so surreal.
I can vividly recall how blown away I was by the scenery facing both east and west. The height and sheer amount of snow is actually crazy, and there's so much room to walk around and explore different viewpoints to get unique perspectives of the environment. But I'd highly recommend beating the crowds to the elevator that takes you to the true summit of the mountain at 3,842 meters or 12,602 feet high. From here, it's easier to pinpoint some of the more iconic peaks nearby, like Mont Blanc, which is that rounded high point in the middle of the cluster you see here. An incredible aspect of this overlook is it's the closest you can get to Mont Blanc without summiting, and speaking of which, this is almost always the starting point for those who do want to take on that challenge. Of course, that is something that is just way out of my skill range, but being able to see the highest point in all of the Alps was outstanding in of itself. Facing west, you'll notice all of those glaciers coming off of Mont Blanc and its neighboring mountains, which was awesome as it's some of the most ice and snow I've ever seen at once. But my favorite direction hands down looks east. With all the jagged, craggy peaks, I'm just a sucker for things like that. And on a clear day, you can see as far as Switzerland's Matterhorn, which was really cool knowing we were just there a few days prior. Facing north, you can look all the way down to Chamonix and the valley below, as well as the mountains boxing it in. While I think it was the least impressive direction, it was still cool as you had all these clouds hovering at the top of the peaks. We spent a long time up here walking around and soaking in the views before we had to make our way back to the bottom.
This experience, I was skeptical if it was going to be worth it with the high price tag and the fact that you really need to time it right with the weather and visibility, but honestly, it was incredible. I would highly recommend you do it. These views are almost unparalleled to any other mountain scenery I've seen in the world. Like, this is just insane, guys. Oh my gosh, everywhere I look, can't believe it.
Next up was something I wanted to squeeze in that sparked the interest of my roller coaster enthusiast side, and that was Les Planards, for Chamonix's only mountain coaster. I could never turn one of these things down, especially considering how close it was in proximity to our other outdoor activities, and because of the otherworldly views on offer.
Come on guys, I couldn't pass up an opportunity to ride a roller coaster in what is basically paradise. Look at this, it's so beautiful around here. You can literally see Mont Blanc from a alpine coaster.
It was also my 999th roller coaster I'd ever ridden, which set me up to make the big 1000 at a theme park near Lyon called Walibi Rhône-Alpes. If you're someone who also appreciates a good adrenaline kick, I'd highly suggest a visit to Walibi on a trip to the area, as it's not even a 2-hour drive away and they have a great assortment of rides and attractions. I have a vlog on my other YouTube channel, Coaster Dash, for those of you interested. As for the coaster here in Chamonix, it was enjoyable for sure, but don't make it a priority if you're limited on time, and definitely not over what I'm about to share next because oh my gosh, just you wait. The #1 day hike in Chamonix, and my favorite hike I've experienced in all of Europe, is the trek to La Jonction, which is a convergence point of 3 massive glaciers coming off of Mont Blanc. It is a very strenuous route, but one that I found so incredibly worth it for the views. To access the trailhead, you'll first have to reach the small 2-man chairlift located right smack dab in this town, which is basically just an outskirt of Chamonix. But it would be super easy to miss, so be sure you're navigating to the right thing. It's titled Glacier des Bossons Chairlift on Google Maps. The fee is €12.50 per adult for a round-trip ticket, and make sure you don't miss the final descent at 18 o'clock or 6 p.m. for my fellow Americans. The operating hours admittedly posed a risk, because with all the other things we'd already done today, I knew I'd be cutting it pretty close. I ended up completing the hike in about 5 hours, but understand that I was completely on my own and I'm a fast hiker. If my family had decided to join me for this, there's no way we'd finish in time to catch the last chairlift. If you did miss it, or for those who maybe want to save a little bit of money, each way from Glacier des Bossons chairlift station is an additional 1.25 miles and very steep. Speaking of which, an important note about this trail, even with the lift shaving off several miles, is you will be gaining more than 1,200 meters or 3,900 feet in elevation. Additionally, expect some rough terrain in some spots. I had read many AllTrails reviews of people saying, don't worry, there's nothing technical about this hike, but I'd like to ask them myself, are you a robot? Because while yes, most of this is a standard trail, there are some fairly dangerous rock scrambles and extremely steep parts. In my opinion, this is not for the faint of heart, easily one of the most difficult day hikes I've ever experienced. Now let's dive into the fun stuff, the nature. The first quarter of the trail takes place in a subalpine forest that occasionally opens up and reveals a view of Chamonix Valley and its surrounding mountains. I didn't find it the most interesting as the hike hadn't changed much in this time, and it's also basically just constant switchbacks until you emerge from the trees. From this point on is where La Jonction becomes a world-class hike, as you'll see your first of 3 glaciers. This is by no means the most dramatic glacier view on the trail, but I was just so blown away by the sheer amount of ice and steep descent. Looking toward Chamonix Valley also gets dramatically more impressive over time as the town becomes smaller and smaller. Then a little bit before the halfway point of the hike is this small building that acts as a rest area with benches and another outstanding view of the aforementioned glacier. This was when I started to take a lot more video footage of the trail because the scenery got far more intense. You'll come across glacier #2 of 3 and my absolute favorite because of how enormous and steep it is. And if you look closely, you'll also spot some massive waterfalls flowing from within the ice. You'll cross to each side of this ridge a few times, meeting back up with glacier #1, and this is most definitely the closest you get to one on the entire journey up. I've seen a lot of glaciers around the world, but never have I ever had this personal of an experience with one, so that was just really cool for me. And then comes probably the most challenging part of the hike, so much steep uphill scrambling that isn't very well marked. And unfortunately it's like this basically all the way to the end. It was at this moment where I'd question if I should even make it to the summit, especially with the limited food I had. But some kind locals were willing to spare some snacks, which gave me a much needed energy boost, and as a result I felt more comfortable pushing myself to complete the hike. Don't think about how much more you've got to go once you reach this point, just keep fighting, and before you know it, you'll have made it to the 2,589 meter or 8,494 feet high La Jonction.
Can you believe this view? Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. Mount Blanc behind me, 3 massive glaciers. This was extremely difficult, this hike, but absolutely it's one of the best I've ever done. I'm blown away. I cannot say enough good things, and this is a must-do. If you're visiting Paris, it would be worth the drive just to do this one hike. It's absolutely unbelievable. Guys, what? Look at that little alpine lake. Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
This view from the summit is nothing short of outstanding, with Glacier 303 straight ahead and the former 2 on either side of it. I felt like I'd never seen so much ice and snow in my lifetime, and certainly not this close. It's fascinating to see all of the different shapes in the glaciers themselves, small streams of water amongst them, and the peaks of the highest mountains in the Alps at the back. Sadly, I'll most likely have to write this hike off as a one-time thing since it was so damn challenging for me, but it was absolutely worth trying for some of the craziest glacier scenery on the planet. Let me know what else is worth doing on a repeat visit to the area, as I'm sure I just scratched the surface with my one-day agenda. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe to Travel Dash for more content like this in the future. Stay tuned because I've got lots of exciting stuff on the horizon, but for now, I'll see you all very soon. Bye guys.